Ancient Greece, the lay of the land. In this unit, you will learn about the geography of ancient Greece, how its environment impacted people's way of life, and how most Greek city-states were forced to build trade alliances to make themselves successful. The isolation of ancient Greece. Greece is located in the far southeast part of the European continent. Today, Greece's geography is defined by a series of mountains. This was no different in ancient times. While these high, rugged mountains helped protect from invading tribes, they also created a very intimidating physical barrier that forced many Greek communities to develop independently. Due to the mountainous terrain that spanned throughout the region, travel between communities proved to be extremely difficult. Little, if any, communication between different settlements existed. If one were forced to travel, one could expect the journey to be difficult. Traveling by land was extremely challenging. People walked or rode in carts that were pulled by pack animals. Donkeys and oxen were sometimes chosen, but mules were ideal since their harder hooves were best suited for the Greek landscape. Roads were nothing more than dirt paths, dry and dusty in the summer and muddy and uneven in the winter. Carts and wagons would frequently break down as their wooden wheels or axles would shatter on the sharp, rocky terrain. Since breakdowns were common, travelers usually had experience in carpentry or the skill of repairing wooden items. Look at this picture. Notice the landscape of Greece. There are mountains everywhere. If a traveler was making a journey to another Greek community, they would likely plan on stopping at a lesh. These were public shelters which offered little else other than a bed to sleep on. Travelers were expected to bring their own food and fresh water, since leshes rarely provided these amenities. Fancier inns did exist for wealthier travelers, and those provided a better night's stay. However, most Greeks could not afford them. In addition to traveling by foot or by a pulled cart, Greeks could also travel by boat. While this was probably the easiest option, it was still unforgettable and just as dangerous. The risk of being attacked or robbed by pirates was high, and the rough and rowdy seas were no place for an inexperienced sailor. Sudden storms would often drive ships off course or send them flailing into the rocky coastline. 2. The quality of ship still left much to be desired. Ships could easily take on water and sink. The definition of flailing is provided in the yellow box. Flailing, to swing wildly to the point of losing control. The Greeks understood how dangerous the sea could be, so they took great precautions to ensure the gods were satisfied before departing. Believing an angry god could wreck their voyage, the Greeks made animal sacrifices, usually a bull, goat, or sheep, to Poseidon. The animal had to be healthy, or it was believed Poseidon would become offended. As an additional safety measure, traveling was typically done during daylight hours. The dangerous rocky coastline would help a sailor meet his fate if he was not aware of its location. To the right, there is a photo. The caption says, "Savage storms and earthquakes were often signs of Poseidon's anger, and people would do whatever they thought was necessary to appease his anger, which usually took the form of human sacrifice." In the photo is a statue of the Greek god Poseidon. The Greeks and their farms. Despite a mountainous environment, farming provided the foundation for most Greek settlements. As expected, this way of life was very difficult. The stony terrain provided little opportunity for large-scale crops to develop. At the same time, ancient Greece, unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, lacked a greater river that could bring annual floods and fertile silt to create rich farmland. Instead of building their lives around a lush river valley, the ancient Greeks were forced to settle on a rocky peninsula that provided few natural resources. With limited flat land available, Greek farmers had to think outside the box to adequately provide for themselves and their families. Many were forced to be creative with their use of land in order to allow for the highest crop yield. Many farmers experimented with something called terracing. The Greeks would dig into the sides of hills and mountains to create flat areas of land. This allowed the Greeks to create more room for crops. A few families were fortunate enough to grow crops that required a large amount of space, like wheat, barley, and oats. However, most farmers specialized in crops that required very little land, such as grapes or olive trees. Olive oil, which was viewed as a source of curing disease, was used frequently in cooking as well as a source of oil for lamps. Athletes would even rub olive oil over their bodies before competition to protect themselves from injury. Olive trees were even viewed as sacred. According to Aristotle, a famous Greek philosopher, anyone caught destroying the tree should be put to death. To the right, there is a photo. The caption says, "Pictured here is an example of the terracing created by Greek farmers." Greek farmers were forced to supplement their limited gardens with animals, but raising animals was seen as a sign of power and wealth. Most people were involved only in agriculture, but animals, such as sheep and goats, which do not need as much grass as cattle, were ideal for Greek farmers. They also were great providers of meat, wool, and milk. Raising chickens and geese was also common. Donkeys and mules were raised as pack animals to lead journeys into the mountains, but horses were seen as a sign of luxury. Because of this, horses were only common in wealthier areas. Good farmland in Greece was rare, which made it very valuable and highly sought after. Over time, this land would create wars between the Greek settlements. With limited farmland available, a rising population, and no room to expand, many Greek settlements were forced to look beyond the mainland of Greece for new sources of food, and many would find great success in doing so. To the right in the yellow box is a definition for the word yield. Yield, the amount produced of a specific crop. There is also the word supplement. Supplement, something that completes or enhances something else when added to it. In the bottom right-hand corner, there is a painting. Olive harvesting. Shown here in this picture was a major seasonal chore for many Greek women. Olives and grapes were two of the most famous Greek exports. Greece and its colonies. Many Greek communities struggled to secure useful farmland on the mainland. As populations increased, the ancient Greeks were forced to look elsewhere to find reliable sources of food. One solution was to start colonies, or settlements in distant places. These colonies would grow food and send it back to the mainland, or possibly establish friendly trade relations with other nearby people. In some cases, colonies were created by expelling criminals or other minorities to avoid an internal conflict. By 900 BCE, Greek colonies were established on the eastern coast of the Aegean Sea in Asia Minor. By 500 BCE, the Greek colonies had totaled more than 500, spanning across more than 30 different city-states. To the right, there are two definitions in yellow boxes. Mainland, the large continuous land of a country, not including islands. Colony, an area owned and controlled by a larger country that is far away. Setting out on a voyage to create a colony was a big step for a city-state. They had to make sure they were fully prepared for the commitment they were undertaking. Colonists would ask the Greek gods to protect them on their journey. The Greeks would spend days, even weeks, praying at temples and performing sacrifices so the gods would allow their journey to be successful. 2, Greeks often sought an oracle, a priest who was believed to be linked to the gods, in order to seek a blessing. Sometimes, the Greeks mandated that a son from every household accompany the mission as a way to show their commitment to the gods. Colonists would then appoint a leader who would make the gather. There's a typo here, I'm sorry. Colonists would then appoint a leader who would make and gather the necessary supplies and make arrangements for their journey. Many family members and friends would donate items, sometimes even giving valuable gifts and heirlooms as they feared they would not see this person again. To make sure they would have fire in their new land, colonists would keep a lit flame from their town's sacred fire, located in the Prytaneum, the center of government life where the fire from the gods was kept. Once the Greeks received their blessing, had the necessary provisions, and secured the sacred flame, it was time to depart. However, the most difficult part of the journey was yet to come. Surviving the long sea voyage was a major challenge. Then, colonists had to find a good location to set up a colony. Ideal places would be near a harbor or around an area with good farmland. Sometimes they encountered local people who did not want them in their lands. Battles would often ensue to decide who had the right to the land. To the left, there is a photo. The caption says, "Here, a Greek colonist consults the Oracle of Delphi about his upcoming voyage." The colonies established by the ancient Greeks would keep close ties to their homeland. The first colony created was called Iona in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. Eventually, Greek colonies would spread to nearby Italy, Asia Minor, and North Africa, but eventually as far as Spain and Egypt. While these colonies were first intended to find a new avenue for food and wealth, soon they became hubs that actively spread Greek culture throughout the ancient world. To the right, there is a photo of a map. The caption says, "This map shows the extent of Greek colonies. Notice how far from the mainland of Greece the colonies were established." A reliance on trade. Starting new colonies was not the only option the ancient Greeks had when resources on the mainland were dwindling. Many Greek settlements focused on trade as a way to get the goods they needed. Some settlements had plenty of good farmland. Therefore, they traded very little. However, others relied heavily on foreign trade because their land limited what they could grow or the animals they could raise. Greek communities that relied heavily on trade did so with different city-states within Greece, Greek colonies, and foreign countries in the Mediterranean region. Common items that were traded by the Greeks were the abundant resources of olive oil, honey, cheese, figs, pottery, and wine. In exchange, they would often receive wood, tools such as knives and swords, perfumes, and grains. Most trade was conducted on the seas by Greek merchants. To the right, there are two yellow boxes containing vocabulary words. The first says foreign, relating to a country other than your own. The second says merchant, a person who sells goods to make money. Navigation with Greek ships was a difficult chore. Greeks had only primitive maps or basic directions to guide them. Some sailors used the stars to guide them, but others are believed to have followed the clouds, which typically form over land. Also, some historians think the Greeks tried to follow specific odors that traveled far from land as a way to guide them. Regardless of which method they chose, only risky sailors traveled at night. Dangers lurked everywhere throughout the Aegean, Mediterranean, and Ionian seas. The rocky, uneven coastline of Greece was known for easily destroying ships, and the abundance of small islands throughout Aegean made even a daytime journey extremely difficult to navigate. Despite these dangers, trade flourished in the Mediterranean region. Too, Greek culture began to spread to faraway regions such as Western Europe, Africa, and even into Arabia and Asia. The more Greek sailors would explore the seas, and the farther colonists would travel to set up colonies in the region, the more the world would come to hear about Greece. As Greek culture began to enter its golden age, the region would soon come to know and fear this country called Greece. In the bottom right-hand corner, there is an image. The caption reads, "Seen here, Athens was a major trading city in ancient Greece."